Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Facilitate Talks. I'm Michael Adenia at Facilitate, and the team and I have recognised that we have been making a huge mistake. As conference organisers, we were going to wait until our next event before we got the advanced therapies community together. And we thought, okay, so we may not be able to gather at hotel bars and conference rooms and so forth, but the conversations that we would have in those environments, we're still kind of having those virtually. And what I've gathered in speaking with friends and colleagues is that there's so much perspective that we can gain from these conversations. And I thought, well, look, what if we just hit record on them and gave everyone the opportunity to gather around that? So here it goes. And every week I'll be joined by experts and friends, and we'll each be posing one big question to each other. And this week, I'm pleased to have three guests for you. And that's Anthony Davis, Lindsay Clark, and Cenk Suman. Hello, guys.
Hello, Michael.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Michael. Hello.
So let's just do a quick round the houses. First of all, Lindsay Clark. So Lindsay heads up Bio-Techne's European Cell and Gene Therapy team and oversees the region's strategic direction and specialist sales team for products and services that are utilized within the cell and gene space. So although Bio-Techne are considered a pretty new player in the cell and gene space, it's actually been a pretty obvious transition for a company that has a long history as a life science tools and tech provider, as well as launching new products. And this is something that I've been given an inside line on over the last few months. Bio-Techne are also, like us, they believe in the power of partnerships, and are earlier this year rolled out a joint venture combining their raw materials with the technologies from a couple of very well-known suppliers, Wilson Wolf and Fresenius Kabi. So yeah, you'll probably no doubt be hearing more about that during this episode. You also have a background in immunology, and your career kind of started in as a technical specialist in cell selection and process automation. And so you've been with Bio-Techne for a couple of years now, but previous to that, you were at Miltenyi for a pretty good stint. How long was that for?
Nearly 8 years. In the front line, hanging out in labs, sorting out processes. A lot of fun, actually.
And the interesting thing about you is that your name came up a couple of times when we were thinking about doing this show. And a couple of people in the team said, you got to have Lindsay on this. You absolutely have to have Lindsay on this. And I think you came up to the same conclusion as to why people might suggest that. Do you want to remind us why that was?
I think didn't I say something like, it's probably because I say something before I think about it?
Yeah. And I thought, you know what, that is a great trait to have for this format. So yeah. Thanks for joining us, Lindsay.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And
over to Cenk Suman. So Cenk and I go way back. I think I first met Cenk back in 2012 or 2013 in a Washington, DC basement for one of our Facilitate events. And Cenk has, again, got a strong background in commercialization and was previously at PCT, now Hitachi, and most recently Thermo Fisher. But his current role is with Stemson Therapeutics, which I remember correctly, Cenk, did that organization start with you and some friends?
That's right. Essentially, as with all great adventures, it's a group of friends. The inventor is a buddy of mine from Stanford that I've known for 20 years. And we snagged the top executive from Illumina to head up as CEO. So it's a great group. And as far as meeting you, Michael, I remember it was in the middle of a snowstorm, a blizzard. That was something out of the movie Snowpiercer. I took a train from New York to DC, and half the people had not showed up because of the snowstorm. But the ones that showed up were really intense, and I think it was a great meeting. So I definitely remember that one.
I remember. It was, yeah, the year of the storm at Facilitate Leaders World, where I think half our delegation were unable to fly in. But that was a year to remember or a year to forget. You know, you take your pick.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a year to remember because, you know, we have setbacks all the time, but it just impressed me how many people in the industry are so bold on the cutting edge. And, you know, whatever it takes, snowstorms, calamities, we show up to get the work done. So that was very impressive for me.
Absolutely, and that is one of the things I love about this industry. So finally, over to Anthony Davis, the CEO and founder of Dark Horse Consulting. And now this is a strange one, Anthony, because you normally chair the opening of our conference and Advanced Therapies Week earlier this year. And it's normally you doing the intros. And I don't think I've ever asked you really, how would you like to be introduced? So how would you like to be introduced, Anthony?
Gosh, I think Lindsay and I were just chatting earlier that I've had one of those careers where, you know, in hindsight, everything can seem to be very well planned and orchestrated. My PhD in the 80s was on scale up of viral vector production when that was an extremely unfashionable area of research. And for 3 years, I was actually a UK government virologist at a time when that wasn't even a remotely interesting profession to confess to. Nowadays, it's a lot more interesting, I'm sure. But I think I'm one of those people, and I know that Yank and Lindsay and you know many who just couldn't get out, could not escape this cell and gene therapy field. In and out of it during PhD, postdoc, first job, tried to get away, never achieved escape velocity. And then suddenly, half a dozen years ago, this field turned into a field where kind of nothing worked in the end in the clinic, to the field where suddenly everything seems to be working. So I think I like to be introduced as one of those people whose career is a testament to the phrase that it's better to be lucky than good.
Wow, and you're one person that's definitely hustled as well to get there and created your own luck too. So brilliant, guys. Well, thank you again for all of you joining us here. And thank you to everyone that's listening, and really, really important feedback. I would love to get as much input from everyone that's listening on how we can make the show better, questions that we can ask the participants and what you guys want to get out of it. So please do hit me up on LinkedIn, or you can drop me an email and I'll put the details of that in the show notes at the bottom. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So each guest has prepared one big question for each of us to tackle. And we're going to go first with Lindsay. What's your big question?
Yeah, so I think it's safe to say that for everyone around the world almost, this has been a pivotal change in the way that you live your life. How, you know, when I reflect on the changes that my team have put together in relatively short space of time, it's fascinating to discuss. So I'd like to ask, what are the changes that you've implemented during this very unusual period? And, how many of them can you see taking forwards into what we see as a sort of a new normal, heading back towards a more normal state, whenever that may be?
Yeah, that's a super question. Yes, we run a highly dispersed team. We have clients from Israel through Europe, North America, APAC, down to Singapore. And we've even done work in Australia. So in a sense, we are well acclimated and prepared. I'm a firm believer, like you, in face-to-face and collaborative environments in real life, as it were. But a lot of the conversations from Dark Horse and a lot of the decisions are made in this room. They always have been made in this room, which is my home office. We temper that, however, with meeting frequently. I was talking to one of our newly hired principals. Actually, the first face-to-face interaction he had with the Dark Horse team was in Miami in January, Michael, where I think I smuggled him in under a day pass I bribed you to give me, just so he could show his face.
Yes, I remember.
I was talking to Scott about this the other day and saying I was so regretful he had not had the standard Dark Horse introduction, because by now, by May, he would have seen me at least 3 or 4 times in 3 or 4 different airports or client facilities, which is, as you know, a pretty low quality lifestyle in reality, but he would have seen me. And we would have broken bread together and looked into each other's eyes. Now he's also a seasoned business traveler, so his message was, it's for now it's fine. And I think there has been a little bit of relief from everyone. I clock on average 100 travel days a year, and this year obviously I'm not going to do that. And hate to be away from home, but I honest to God, I'm really missing it, and I think everybody is in a sense as well. So what are we going to do? What new skills are we going to learn? Because although I'm a firm believer in the long view, and I believe the long perspective will be much more similar to how life was before than it will be different. But in the meantime, we do have to learn more skills and find different ways of doing things, especially with organizations like Facilitate, who've always added such value by their big gatherings.
Lindsay, so you guys at Bio-Techne, you were telling me about some of the things that as a global organization you've been connecting virtually over this period as well. Do you think that that's something that could you expand on that a little bit more, and is that something that you think will carry on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm based in Europe. The parent organization is in the US already. So I spend a lot of my late afternoons on conference calls to the US regardless. When you think a bit like following on from what Anthony said, we are people who live out of suitcases. I'm on the conference circuit frequently. That's how we know each other. And, my team, again, cover large geographic areas and travel a lot. Suddenly they're locked down and they're having to find new ways of working. And so, we immediately had a kind of we've instigated things like we have a daily huddle just so that we can feel connected. For the wider organization, very early on, we have probably 80 people out in the field who are used to working in the field, remotely in their home office. But then we had all the office team who were suddenly isolated when, you're used to bumping people. I have a really nice mix where I go into our offices, but I also work from home. And, I always find bumping into people in the corridors. And that was a very strange transition where suddenly there were people that you'd pass the time of day with, you'd have a useful interaction, but actually, not feeling that you need to book in a meeting to have a chat with someone, but you could just message them and say, actually, we've got 5 minutes now. Getting into that way of working was quite strange, but something that, definitely taking forwards. Engaging with our clients, again, we've got a lot of people, we do a lot of work with process development teams, with manufacturing teams. Quite a few people are at home. How do we engage with the wider community where, we'd be doing it at conferences, for example. We'd see people, we'd have a few drinks at the bar probably, and we'd have a good chat, and missing that. And actually, having to come to terms with actually, it's just really nice to pick up a phone and have a chat with somebody that you've worked with, just check in and see how they're doing. We very on realized that, we needed to get, I sort of feel, having worked on this kind of supplier side for, pretty much all my career in cell and gene therapy, that, we're in a privileged position, a bit like you guys at Facilitate. I almost feel like it's our job to connect people. There's so many challenges within our industry. And if I can bring people together that, are in my little black book of contacts that can make a difference to some of these challenges, that's what I really enjoy doing and seeing these kind of connections made. So we wanted to see if we could do that in a virtual format. And I can now talk about it with relief, but last week we put on our first virtual symposia. I had no idea how it was going to work. We actually went out and looked at a completely different industry and got advice on, well, how do you engage people in online content? I don't know about you guys, but I think there's something called webinar fatigue. I'm very good at putting on a webinar on one screen and then finding something else to do on another screen. And so we wanted to create a way to almost bring the speakers into your home. So actually insisting that our speakers had their video on, so they were in, you were face to face with them, having a host of the symposia so that it would go back to Kamar in my team, so that he was connecting everybody. So you felt like, you felt that you were part of this meeting. And, I'm very good at, leaving them to get on with things. We had technical issues. I think that was part of the charm. But actually, I managed to stay tuned in for nearly 2 hours, and most of our audience did too, which really surprised me because, if you run a webinar, you lose half the audience fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's a common stat a common metric with webinars is what is the drop-off rate throughout. So keeping people engaged.
Keeping people engaged is a challenge.
For an extended period of time when they're already at home. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Sorry, guys, I've got a builder doing some slabs in our back garden at the moment. But yeah, keeping people engaged over that sort of period is really tough. So to be honest with you, Lindsay, I reckon my organisation might learn some things from you in organising events from what you've done last week. So well done for pulling that off.
It's no secret. It was going, and I watched a digital marketing agency webinar on how do you keep people engaged and pivoted exactly what we were going to do.
Yeah.
We didn't, I was going to go with normal webinar. Oh, we've got some speakers. Let's do 20 minutes and Q&As. And actually, you get bored quite quickly of that. This is me not thinking, words are coming out, not thinking. Yeah. But it's unnatural.
I want to use your question and ask Cenk a question, actually, because Cenk, working for a therapeutic company, who, I suppose in this environment could potentially be a customer of a Bio-Techne or an organization like that. Like and Cenk, I know your passion is around moving from early to late stage and developing manufacturing strategies. How have you been able to do your work at the moment?
Yeah, so it's been a major challenge, and I really hear the comments from Anthony and Lindsay as well on this. So when I joined this company last September, my MO was essentially as a bi-coastal executive, right? So I still live in New York City area. This company's in San Diego. I figured, okay, I now have friends that live in California, commute to Wall Street and back. I'll just essentially do the reverse commute, right? I'll fly out on Monday morning. I'll spend a week in San Diego, fly back for the weekend to spend time with family, and maybe I'll alternate 1 week there and 1 week at home. And it actually worked really well for half a year, and we advanced on our goals and aims. And now, of course, with the pandemic, all that travel has been the biggest challenge, right? The lack thereof. So I haven't been able to, of course, travel to San Diego. So I'm very eager to see in a safe way how we can open up travel and kind of get back some of that routine. It's very difficult to collaborate and share information and build new strategies without being there in person. We've been, as with all executives, we've been working on that to get better. And we managed to keep our team together at Stemson Therapeutics, working productively and actively. So that's been a big focus for us that already bore fruit in April. And our CEO, Jeff Hamilton, has really put together a great plan. And we managed to close a seed round in March, right before the kind of castle gates closed. I was just actually in Tokyo giving presentations, flew back kind of right before the travel stopped in the middle of March. And we were able to actually move off our cradle, as it were, where we were founded at the Sanford Burnham Prebys Institute, to our first facilities with Wet Lab at the General Atomics campus, a nice hill overlooking La Jolla, which, as a government contractor site with a long history of working with the U.S. government, it remains functional with a working cafeteria and meticulously manufactured, manicured gardens, everything well tended. Of course, none of which I get to experience now, being a remote executive stuck on the East Coast. So, I mean, there's a bright side. I'll join Anthony to reiterate that at Stemson Therapeutics, we're actively hiring and expanding our team during the economic downturn, and there's a lot of talent out there, and we want to work with the best people. So I think that's been a good focus for us to kind of batten down the hatches and keep moving forward despite the storm. And we've done the usual implementing shifts, working on testing and personal protective equipment and distancing, and we want to maximize employee safety in a lab. And we basically gone, we have a great team. So it's that old adage, hire the best people and get out of their way. So we've actually gone to our team to say, what makes you feel safer working in a lab? And as an executive group, how can we help achieve that environment so that you feel safe balancing work and life? And everyone has kids at home. So, and we're doing our experiments in mice. We're moving to pigs this year. But if we think about mice in our animal facilities, I know as a former immunologist and virologist, we've all done plenty of time injecting mice. Essentially, we've been socially distancing our mice in cages all along. And now we can really commiserate with these mice since we've been essentially self-caged essentially now for weeks. So I really sympathize with the mice more. But on the bright side, we can go into these animal facilities and keep doing experiments. Essentially, an individual scientist can prepare their materials, go into the mouse facility and make our injections and get the data. And a big focus on data as well, right? So just making sure that we're making the best use of our data, because as scientists we tend to push ahead to get to the hot experiments, and then data piles up on the side, right? I don't know any scientist that has basically completed all their homework as far as data analysis. And now we're going back and saying, okay, let's be really diligent. Have we gotten the most out of our data? Is there anything on the shelf that we can go back and reanalyze and add value? So I think from those perspectives, we've aimed to be as productive as we can given the circumstances.
That's really interesting. So there's like a deeper sort of interrogation of your data that is relatively new because of the pandemic then, eh?
Yeah, and Michael, it's even things like AI and machine learning. These things have been attractive in the past for us to evaluate, but now we're saying, okay, like, how do we get the most out of the existing data? Maybe we should turn to these new methodologies and algorithms to kind of squeeze more value out of our existing data and take another look.
Nice. Okay, so I'm going to shift now over to second big question. Cenk, over to you. What big question would you like to ask us?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when you posed this to us, for me, the focus has been, okay, well, there's a pandemic and we have to react in a reasonable, rational manner. There's many models on how to approach this. One thing that we've seen in the US now, and I think I can just speak to the US, but this is probably an issue globally, is that we have a lot of, some of this data came from Facilitate as well, that clinical trial is likely the area that's the most highly impacted because of the pandemic. So I think the latest figures were that there's globally over 1,000 clinical trials now that have been put on hold, and hopefully these will kind of restart at some point. But as we all know, these are not trivial to restart, and patient recruitment is a challenge even when there's not a pandemic. Hospitals are in trouble in the US due to a precipitous drop in revenues. And we realized part of what makes medical care so expensive in the US is elective surgeries. And this is the purvey of a population that's actively trying to stay healthy, trying to stay on top of the information, to be well informed, and to engage the hospitals in a productive way. But that's all down now because everyone's basically holed up at home and avoiding hospitals and preserving bandwidth for COVID-19 related health cases. So what do we do with everything else that's on hold? I mean, that was my big question. I mean, there's oncology studies, cardiovascular studies, some actually turn back to the pandemic because some of these, obesity, cardiovascular are actually risk factors for developing COVID-19 symptoms. And should we really, how do we prioritize in the time of a pandemic? I guess that would be the question. And I'd be really interested to hear from my colleagues what they feel about this.
That's really interesting. Who wants to take a stab at this?
Oh, I'm happy to, Michael. I think it's a terrific question, Cenk. There was a fascinating article in the New York Times last week from a pulmonologist working in a Manhattan emergency room who was distressed to see his beds only 39% occupied. Obviously, they had been saturated with COVID-19 patients for many weeks, but normal occupancy is approximately twice what he was seeing last week as an emergency pulmonologist. And his question was, where are these people? Where they should have been was in his hospital. They were not, because basically, as Cenk said, to put it more succinctly, we're all terrified of hospitals right now. I've been terrified of hospitals in my life, but that's another story. We're all especially terrified of hospitals right now. And these patients are deteriorating, dying, and not receiving the care which countries like the United Kingdom and the United States have invested so much in being able to provide. My wife's an oncologist at a large urban med center, and a lot of her patients are immunocompromised. She is persuading as many of them as possible to delay starting treatment programs, because the last place she wants them to come in is her hospital. But on the other hand, in a normal world, those treatment programs would and should have started weeks ago. And I think what Cenk is saying is we're kicking a lot of cans down the road here. And they will still be on the road when we get there.
It's really interesting because we did a survey via Facilitate Exchange a couple of weeks ago in assessing the impact of the pandemic on the advanced therapies industry, and we asked respondents, which are the areas that are going to be of most impact, and like you've identified, Cenk, clinical trials is the number one area that are going to have the biggest impact, and second to that was hospital administration of therapies, things like supply chain and manufacturing and affordability, way further down the list. And it feels like this is a leading indicator to what might be the lagging indicators of not having that data that we need. Organizations like Bio-Techne, you're probably going to start seeing a significant reduction potentially in orders. This is really quite interesting. I'd love to, get your take on this as well.
I mean, it's very deep question. I mean, it's impacting on every aspect of our lives. We have seen, I think it's safe to say, we have seen and expected a drop off, from a supply perspective in sales, but it's been a real mixed bag. Actually, there's you see some areas, academic research institutions, all that kind of thing. And I'm sort of at that early part of the chain, really. We have a lot of the commercial entities that we work with, the conversations are not about the trials being halted. We're keeping going while we can, growing up that supply chain. It's about, I spend a lot of time, what are we doing as an organization to make sure that we are able to supply the manufacturing and everything going forwards. And, it's been fascinating from a business perspective to see how we have pivoted our teams internally to make sure that as far as we're concerned for our customers, it's business as normal. If you're working with us, we will supply you and we will provide you, because, if you look at Bio-Techne as a bigger picture company, our core capabilities are in making antibodies, proteins, and assays combining the two. Well, guess what the COVID serological test uses? You can imagine we've been making an awful lot of, we've pivoted a lot of our resources into making the COVID peptides and antibodies to that. And that's all, that's a complete change in direction, but one that is needed. And it's our customers, it's actually, I'm very proud to be part of an organization where we know it's the researchers who are using our products who are going to solve this solution. And so actually for us, as we're seeing, we see shifts in people's patterns of purchasing, but again, you just pivot to respond to that. It doesn't really solve it's not really a reflection of what we see in the hospitals long term. That is going to be, it's going to impact on all of us, but we have to, as a community, as, it's going to be, we're going to have to prioritize. It comes back to the question, what is the priority?
Yeah, and I suppose maybe that's all it is a case of, look, we're in a pandemic, like mood music is, let's deal with that. And does everything else have to take a back seat for a period of several months potentially? Is that what you're feeling, Cenk?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, as Lindsay has put it, business goes on. And the reliability of suppliers should always be a primary characteristic. But in these times of potential disruptions, I think reliability and quality goes to the very top. So we want to be working with suppliers that have worked this out and are able to keep things going and provide supplies that makes sure that the research is ongoing, right? So that's become even more important for us.
Yeah, and it just to sort of hark back to the importance of the research, because if you've got researchers who are going to solve the problem of COVID, ultimately, they can't get what they need. And, I obviously have a big thing about supply chain continuity. It's one of the most important things in our industry. But actually, that same level of importance needs to be put. So we prioritize COVID shipments. If we know that someone's working on COVID, that gets flagged up in the ordering system. So we know we've got to get that out. Priority, it's changing the way, even simple things that we do to meet the needs of what's going into solving this problem.
And Anthony, Dark Horse have pivoted and are supporting COVID in some capacity as well. Is that right?
We have, actually, we have a standing corporate goal of spending a fixed percentage of our revenue every year on philanthropic activity. And obviously this year we've put all of that budget into supporting some pro bono COVID-19 work. We're working with an international team on analytical method development for better, more robust tests.
Wow.
Leveraging our existing expertise in viral vector testing, which we have a lot of. And we've also got a couple of other projects which will become public in due course. And I think this has served multiple purposes. Sure, we check the box on our philanthropic goal, but also everybody wants to do something to help. So it's been genuinely motivating for all of our team, myself included, that if you think you can just do something to help speed the end of this thing, then you do. And obviously we feel that because we're lucky enough to have good skills and relevant skills, we are actually helping materially in some way also.
Well, that's brilliant. So I didn't know that is something that you allocated for every year, and it's brilliant that you're able to pivot and support both pro bono in that sort of way so quickly. That's fantastic.
Well, it's one of those things where we talk about this a lot when we allocate that budget. We can go and pick up litter off the beach, and that's good. But we always try to find a philanthropic donation which is in some way relevant to our day-to-day and the issues that we care about. in our work life as well.
Brilliant. So last question, over to you, Anthony. What's your big question for us?
The big question I want people like us to address, strangely, it has nothing to do with this pandemic. I want us to think about how the world is going to address the next pandemic. Because there will be another pandemic as night follows day. And those who fail to study history are doomed to repeat it. In a sense, we're in a privileged position right now because history is unfolding every day in front of our eyes. And shame on us if we do not take advantage of that for the betterment of future generations. Cup half full, I think one of the positives that will come out of this experience is a much greater appreciation of the value of extremely high quality, nimble healthcare research and development. And we as a group have always believed in this, but I think now the world really knows that if you can't test for pathogens, if you can't model their spread, if you can't rapidly strategize mitigations and treatments, then you should be able to. I think it's interesting that in the month of April, the biotech-specific venture capital raised was an all-time high. The previous record was in August 2018, and in April 2020, around about $5 billion were raised in new funds. And this was blue chip money from well-known names in the venture industry, Venbio, Third Rock, et cetera, And what's interesting to me about that is that while a lot of the heavy lifting for these fundraisers was definitely done prior to the pandemic, the funds closed in April, which was more than long enough after the pandemic set in for people to change their minds and get cold feet. But they didn't, or at least 5 billion worth didn't. We'll never know if some did. But even if that's the case, this was just by a little bit a record raise. That money is there. Last time I checked the interest rate on my savings account, that's not looking so good. So these investors will want to deploy this capital in biotech and healthcare over the next year or two. I think that's a tremendous sign, and I hope that we will use a lot of that money directly and indirectly to better address the next pandemic. Cell and gene therapy will have a role in fixing this one, not a frontline primary role. The next pandemic, who knows? We don't know, and that's the point.
Wow, I think that's a huge question. Do you think then, Anthony, that there's as much responsibility on biotech and pharma in dealing with the next pandemic as much as governments and society and so forth? Or is your question specifically relating to how is the cell and gene therapy community going to deal with going to prepare for the next pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good point, Michael. I mean, there are layers, okay? We sit in the cell and gene shell of the onion. Outside of us is the biotech share of the onion. Outside of that is the global investment community. And probably outside of that is the federal and governmental shell. They all need to work better, obviously. I think it's ironic that at a time in history when the world is theoretically better able to communicate than ever before, communication and coordination has probably been the worst and literally most embarrassing part of many countries' response to this situation. So I think, yes, I remain focused. Dark Horse has always been cell and gene only. That's the way it's going to stay. But we operate within wider ecosystems, wider and wider and wider ecosystems. And I think that's we have to continue to focus on the day-to-day, but remain aware of the strategic issues.
I suppose this is a good question for Lindsay and Cenk to both take a stab at, seeing as one, Lindsay obviously based in Europe, but for a large global organization, and Cenk with your lean biotech as well. I'd love to get the perspectives of organizations of your size, and well, how do we better prepare for the next pandemic?
So when that question came up, I furiously scribbled some notes down, and do you know what I wrote in capital letters? Communication. I just, when we've looked at, everything from government responses, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're all people being asked to do things completely different to what normal is for us. And I think I've learned over the years, the best way to get someone to do something that they might not be keen around is communicating it effectively. And I think that it's something that I think we'll reflect on. So once we get through this, how was it communicated? Where were the different strategies? All of this, it underpins, it underpins everything we do. It's interesting, you mentioned the financing side of things. Do you think the impact of lockdown is that people are more available, so therefore they could have those more difficult conversations around, actually, should we pull out, and be able to discuss it more? I certainly find myself more available for far too many Zoom calls. But it's getting that engagement with people, building those relationships. Actually, sometimes it's a bit easier.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, Lindsay. I think, we are able to talk and think more. And, one of the flip sides of 100 travel days a year is a hell of a lot of wasted time.
Yeah.
And not to mention the commute into the office and back from the office and to the airport and so on and so forth. So that's a plus. I think that 9/11 caused many people to predict not just the end of business travel, but the end of travel as we knew it. And I think 2 years later, business travel hit all-time record levels. I think we're compulsive as a species. We're compulsive face-to-face communicators, and we do it however and whenever we can. I don't think that's going to change. And as I said, I think in a few years' time, the world will be a lot more like it was than the way it is. But I certainly agree with you that that in distress there is always opportunity.
Yeah, and that communication point after the UK government's announcement yesterday, which absolutely threw up more questions and doubt than it answered. What would you agree, Cenk? Has communication been a key word with your organization?
Yeah, and I really want to thank Anthony for asking this question. He's sort of, I see him as the resident philosopher of the cell and gene therapy community. So this is wonderful direction that he's pointing us into. And I have to give example of my kids. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, and they're going to be the next generation of leaders, hopefully, as parents, we'd hope, right? So I said, look, this is how we're dealing with this pandemic. Last time this happened was 1918 with Spanish flu, and 50 million people died. And my daughter asked, if I had to live through those times, would it have been better to live through the Spanish flu or this SARS-2, COVID-19? And how have we gotten better as a human society globally in 100 years? And I was actually hard pressed to find, the obvious, we have technology and all this kind of other modern tools at our disposal. But, in some ways, we've actually taken some steps back. And, Anthony pointed out all levels of government and leadership needs to work better, because we know the viruses don't respect borders, and we need to value science over hype and favor global collaboration over finger pointing or the usual media spins or this kind of social media amplification chambers. I think it's causing people to take a hard look at this, even when they're at home for the most time, and all they have to go to is the social media for a lot of the cases. So I'm hoping we're valuing seriousness and focus and real leadership better in times of crisis. And one thing I pointed out to my kids is that, look, we're a global community, and everyone's very self-critical of their own families. So, you mentioned UK, people in the US are critical, people in France are critical of their leadership. I said, there's solutions globally. Don't just look at your own community or your own country, but look throughout the whole, human populations and how they deal with this. We've seen good examples from, just to name one, New Zealand, right? The leadership there. And encouraging people to look beyond their communities and their own societies and just to think more as a species, let's put it that way.
I think from something that I sort of have come across fairly recently is I have quite a few friends that aren't scientists, and suddenly they're in Science's corner, and they are educating themselves on things that, a deep and dark virology, and then asking my opinion on it from an immunology perspective. And I'm going, where did you learn these words? It's fascinating how suddenly science and medicine is cool. I like that.
That is actually a massive positive to learn from this. Actually, is that it to an extent, making science accessible to a lot more people will have its benefits in terms of a greater understanding and a greater buy-in later down the line as well, I imagine. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in this conversation. And I think that we've all shared some really, really interesting points that I'm excited to get this out and get this turned around and to get feedback from the wider community. So I want to thank each of you. And can each of you, in terms of how people, if someone wanted to get in touch with you on a one-to-one via email or social, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Lindsay, have you got a way that you'd like people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn's usually the best way to get hold of me. My inbox is a piece of work, so might actually get through.
I second Lindsay on this. LinkedIn for me as well, please.
Perfect. And you, Anthony?
LinkedIn is good. Also, our company website has a contact box, and we monitor that very closely.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I will make sure we include everyone's LinkedIn contact details when we share this episode as well. And well, guys, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. And we'll speak again soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Sounds good, Michael. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe.
Well, that's the end of the first episode. I really hope you found it interesting and insightful at a time when we can't all meet in person. And if you did, please do share it with someone else that you think might also find it of value. But before we wrap up, I want to let you know about an excellent webinar that we've got coming up at Facilitate Exchange, and it's titled Reproducibility, Reliability, Robustness, Establishing Cornerstones for Cell Standardization of Cell Manufacturing. The webinar will deep dive into the manufacturing parameters that have a significant effect on product performance. We've got 3 excellent speakers for you: Francesco Darzi, who is the head of regenerative medicine at King's College London; Scott Jones, who is the VP of Scientific Affairs at BioBridge Global; and Stephen Thompson, the VP of Sales and Product Management at Sexton Biotechnologies. And we have to give a lot of credit to Steve Thompson and the team at Sexton for pulling together such an excellent panel for you. It's really going to give viewers some tangible strategies to explore for their own variability mitigation strategies. So the webinar is taking place on the 27th of May and has a limited number of spaces. So sign up early at facilitate.co.uk/exchange and hit the webinars tab right at the top of the page. Well, that's it for now, and we'll see you all soon.